Hey, I'd like to welcome you to another episode of Mission Matters. My name is Adam Torres, and if you'd like to apply to be a guest on the show, just head on over to missionmatters.com and click on Be Our Guest to apply. All right, so today I have Stacy Richter on the line, and he is CEO over at Lingua. Stacy, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Adam. Pretty excited to be here with you and Mission Matters and the rest of your community.
So lots to talk about here today, but first, I know there's a lot going on with AI and translator apps and a lot of other things out there, and I'm curious to hear from your standpoint, because I remember using tools like, I don't even remember what my first one was. I wrote my first book on like a dictating app, so I know that things are progressing fast with AI and with these tools specifically, so I want to get into what you're doing at Lingua, but before we do, I'm like, how'd you even get into this business? Let's start there.
Yeah, that's a great question. You know, one of my personal missions that has mattered to me the most can really be summed up in 3 words: people, purpose, and profit. And this has always been a big part of my career as a professional and an entrepreneur. And I think back to the very beginning of my professional career, I started working with Fortune 500 companies after school and all these great things. And what I found out was how miserable I was doing that. And this was before I came up with my 3-point mission of people, purpose, and profit. And it was after the fact that I realized that I wasn't meeting any or all 3 of those elements, which is why I was so miserable. And that's when I started my entrepreneurial career. Fast forward 25 plus years to where I'm at with Lingua as the CEO as of 2.5 years ago. I started buying and selling businesses and always found ventures that had to fill all 3 of those buckets. And I came across Lingua actually through an introduction from mutual colleagues, and the co-founders were looking for an exit. And I was in the right place at the right time, that I had the qualifications. And more importantly, the organization was in a position where they could help me fill my 3 buckets of people, purpose, and profit. And, long story short was I took over as CEO after falling in love with the people in the organization, the clients we serve, and then more importantly, how we help our clients.
What specifically kind of interested you about the business side of this opportunity and this industry? Like what was the sweet spot there for you?
This goes back to when I actually spent some time in Germany. So during my undergraduate studies in university, I had an amazing opportunity to travel to Europe as part of a student exchange. So I came from my home in Calgary and all the way across the pond to study in Germany. Now, I had taken 2 years of German studies while I was at the university, and that was all book learning. There was a lot of transactional language learning, memorizing vocabulary, grammar, and of course doing examinations. So 2 to 2.5 years of German study. Then when I went to Germany to live and study at university there in a full immersion environment, I learned more in a 6-month than I did in 2.5 years of study. Now, it was my very first exposure to the learning of a second language and the process of it. And although I didn't know it then, this is over 25, 30 years ago, I didn't know it then, but that impacted my life, which had brought me to Lingua. But in having studied and learned a second language, that it has given me career opportunities. There was no other way I would have acquired without having learned a language. It's also changed the way I think, because when we learn additional languages as an adult, it literally changes the function and the format of how our brain works. It just accesses a different part of our brain. So the side benefits of knowing a second language or having spoken a second language, aside from being able to connect with other people in their native language, has been confidence, self-esteem, creativity around problem solving, just in my general everyday life and professional career. So that was my very first exposure. So 25 plus years later, when I come across Lingua, I had never even thought of owning or being a significant part of a language school as a business. But I remembered my experience studying and living in Germany. And like, oh my God, like that was such a great experience for me. And when I see what some of our students and the experiences they're having, so that fills all 3 of my buckets. So I just needed to be a part of that.
So that's interesting. And also, you talk about this as a full stack solution. What exactly does that mean?
Yeah, so full stack language services, when you think about it, includes a combination of technology, tools, and activities, as well as live instruction, right? If we think conventionally how languages are taught and learned, like even in universities and in structured classroom environments, it has always been one mode, right? It's either it's a tutor, live tutor up at the front, or professor, instructor giving you some instructions. You're reading textbooks and doing exercises. That's a single leg language service. But the pendulum has swung so far the other way to the technology side with translator apps, interpretive services, AI, to name a few, that the pendulum has swung so far the other way. That's also a single-legged language service. So when I'm talking about full stack language services, it really is combining all of the tools that are available in a way that makes sense for the student so they can learn the language as fast as they possibly can, get as far down the learning curve as possible, but more importantly, have as much fun doing it as they can so they continue down that learning journey.
And you work with corporations as well, too, or with businesses. Like, what does that mean on the corporate side of training?
Yeah, that's a great question. So on the commercial side of our business, there are so many organizations, especially today, that deal internationally, right? We're constantly dealing cross-border, especially with technology as an enabler when we're talking about video conferencing softwares and everything we do. We have never had a better chance to do business internationally than we do today. And for a lot of businesses, if they don't think they're doing business internationally, they're being disrupted by somebody who is. So we work with organizations who have a need to do business internationally, whether it's a for-profit business, a nonprofit, NGOs, ENGOs, or government institutions who do business across borders in multiple different geographies. Now, the key here is the way we work with them is in a full stack language learning service like I just mentioned. Because as much as there can be transactional tools like AI and translators, when we're doing business, people like doing business with other people, which requires some level of know, like, and trust. And if we keep our communications transactional, we never really do get beyond a transactional relationship, and we don't get that know, like, and trust. So when we're working with organizations, we help their employees, their teams, learn another language in the business or the area that they are working in so that they can get enough confidence so that they can make that connection cross-culturally. Because when we think about what language is being able to make a connection, a human-to-human connection with another person from a different culture. And we're not transactional creatures. We're very emotional. We're rational, right? We need context and content to be able to make those connections. And that's what a full stack language service does in an organization, is it trains those people on how to speak a second language, whether it's Spanish or German or French or English or Japanese and everything else in between, with the people they want to do business with. So they now have a rapport and a connection with those individuals. I mean, I'll give you a recent example of mine. I was actually working with an M&A group out of Austria literally 2 weeks ago, and we were looking at buying another service or business, and all I needed to do was to start a very high-level, polite conversation, but I used some of my German skills. It's probably the last little bit that I still have left, right, after all these years of not practicing and losing it, but I had enough where I could politely start the conversation in their native language, and I'll tell you what, the entire meeting changed temperature instantly. They became warm, they're a lot more open, right, and I had this rapport that I couldn't have otherwise done using any other tools other than the training that I got. So when we think about full stack language services, we don't necessarily have to train somebody to be 100% fluent where they're now writing government contracts in a foreign language, right? That's where the transactional language services can work really well. But it's enough to be conversational so that they can use that skill to build the rapport, like, and trust with the person they're communicating with.
Let's take it to the basics for a moment here. What is the best way for somebody to learn another language? Like, what are some of the core components?
Yeah, this is a funny question because literally the fastest way to learn a second language is just to get up and move to a foreign country where they don't speak your native language and live there for 6 months. That is it. That is the fundamental universal truth of language learning. So I actually like to brag that we're the second fastest way to learn a second language. So is there a way to simulate that full immersion environment from the comfort and convenience of our homes? And the short answer is yes. but it's not with technology alone, right? The reason full immersion, like that getting up and moving, like I left my house in Calgary, Alberta, Canada, moved to Germany, why that is so effective is we're exposed to native speakers, again, whether it's Spanish, French, German, Japanese, where they speak quickly, they use slang, they use dialects and cultural references, and that's just not going to come from technology like AI. But we can get this type of experience from the convenience of a laptop, but it's going to require that full stack language services, which includes live tutors who are also native speakers of the language you want to learn.
Yeah, I can see that. And I remember, when I was in college, that's when I did an immersion program a long time ago, similar to what you're mentioning, but not Germany, it was Spain. And that's where I took some Spanish lessons. And I was there for a while. And I remember I started to dream in Spanish, and it was a lot of fun.
Brilliant.
Thinking back, and I'm like, yeah, but now with technology, the fact that with a service like yours, you can get that same type of like constant reinforcement, because not everybody has time to or has the flexibility to just up and leave for a while, like maybe a college kid does, right? So I get it. That being said, Stacy, if somebody's listening or watching this, and if they want to follow up, and if they want to learn more about Live Lingua, whether they're on the corporate side and they want to think about it for their company or individuals, like what's the best way for people to engage and to connect with your team?
Absolutely. So the first place to look is on our website at livelingua.com. And for any organizations that would like to book a right fit call and discuss whether this is a good strategy for them, there is a link to corporate language learning on our homepage, so livelingua.com. And then outside of that, you can find us on all major social media with our handle, Live Lingua. Super simple. Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, TikTok, YouTube. It's all the same. Live Lingua on all social media platforms.
Amazing. And for everybody watching, just so you know, we'll definitely put some links in the show notes so you can just click on the links and head right on over. And speaking of the audience, if this is your first time with Mission Matters and you haven't done it yet, hit that subscribe or follow button. This is a daily show. Each and every day we're bringing you new content, new ideas, and hopefully new inspiration to help you along the way on your journey as well. So again, hit that subscribe or follow button. And Stacy, thanks again for coming on the show.
Thanks, Adam. Appreciate you.